Detective Isaiah Mwesi parked his tattered sedan outside the main entrance of the Grand Plaza Hotel and slowly got out of the car, adjusting his tie. The Oklahoma City evening air was humid and stuffy, and the hotel's neon sign flashed red and gold lights, creating a festive atmosphere that contrasted sharply with the reason for his visit. At 39, Mwesi had seen enough deaths to know. The worst crimes often happen in the most inopportune places. The hotel's automatic doors opened before him with a quiet hiss, and the detective found himself in a luxurious lobby with marble floors and a crystal chandelier. Groups of people in festive clothing were gathered at the columns and in the corners, their voices sounding muffled and anxious. The elevator slowly ascended to the 7th floor, where room 712 was located. The corridor was filled with people in festive clothes, guests of the wedding that had now become a crime scene. Women in brightly colored dresses were talking quietly among themselves. Men were smoking near the windows, and someone was crying in a far corner. The atmosphere was heavy and unsettling. Officer Thomas Mukambi met the detective at the room door. His normally calm face expressed tension and fatigue, emotions that had been building up over the past 2 hours since the discovery of the body. "What have we got?" Mwesi asked, putting on latex gloves. Kira Niobe, 27 years old, reporter for the local newspaper, the Oklahoma City Chronicle. Got married at 4 o'clock this afternoon at St. Luke's Church. After the ceremony, there was a small party here at the hotel. At about 7 p.m., went up to her room to remove her makeup and change her clothes. At 9, a childhood friend found her. Mwesi nodded and scrutinized the lock on the door. There were no signs of forced entry. Either the door was unlocked or the perpetrator had a key. Was the door locked when the friend found it? No, it was ajar. The friend says she knocked, got no answer, pushed the door open, and walked in. The detective entered the room and immediately smelled the distinctive odor of expensive perfume mixed with a faint chemical scent. The room was spacious and elegant, with a large bed, cushioned armchairs by the window, and a desk. A body lay on the bed in an unnatural pose, arms spread apart. Kira was wearing a strapless white wedding dress, but no underwear, a fact that was immediately apparent. The bride's face was pale and her lips had a slight bluish tinge, which could indicate poisoning or asphyxiation. On the bedside table was an empty champagne glass with some golden liquid at the bottom, and the jewelry that had been removed, pearl earrings, a bracelet, and a wedding ring, was lying beside it. Mwesi walked over to the dressing table where the cosmetics were spread out. The lipstick was uncapped, and several cotton pads were stained with foundation and mascara. Obviously, Kira had actually washed off her makeup before she died. A bottle of perfume stood open, exuding the same scent the detective had smelled upon entering. "Who found the body?" he asked as he continued to study the room's furnishings. "Imani Kanyago, a childhood friend of the bride, said she came to check on why it was taking Kira so long to return to the party." The detective walked slowly around the room once more, noting every detail. The bathroom was neat. Towels hung straight, makeup in its place. There were cotton pads stained with makeup on the sink, and an open jar of makeup remover next to it. The shower stall was dry. There were white satin high-heeled shoes on the floor. "Did you call CSI and ME? Dr. Adams is on his way. Should be here in 20 minutes. Forensics are on their way too." Mwesi scrutinized the bedside table. The champagne glass stood exactly centered, as if it had been placed very carefully. Next to it lay a small white clutch purse. The detective opened it carefully. Inside were lipstick, powder, mints, a room key, and a turned-off cell phone. Going down to the lobby of the hotel, the detective saw a familiar picture. Relatives and loved ones of the victim in a state of shock. There were 3 people sitting on cushioned couches. A man in a black suit was nervously crumpling a handkerchief, obviously the groom. Next to him sat a middle-aged woman in a dark blue dress, her face swollen with tears. A little farther away, in a chair by the window, was a young woman with a camera in her lap. "Darius Obenga?" The detective turned to the man in the suit. The man raised his head and nodded. His dark eyes were full of pain and confusion. "Yes, that's me. Yeah, I was her husband. Only for a few hours." His voice shook, but he tried to keep his composure. "I'm very sorry for your loss, Mr. Obenga. When was the last time you saw your wife alive?" "After the ceremony, we came here to the hotel. There was a small reception in the banquet room, about 30 guests. Kira looked happy, but said she was tired from the heavy dress. She wanted to go up to the room, take off her makeup, change, and go back to the guests. It was about 7 o'clock in the evening." "And you didn't go up to the room with her?" "No, I stayed downstairs with the guests. We agreed that she would clean up quickly and come down. It usually took her 20 or 30 minutes. The woman in the blue dress sobbed louder and lifted her crying face. "I am Amina Vasa, Kira's mother. My daughter was so happy today, detective. She was glowing with joy. Who could have done such a terrible thing to her?" Moisi sat down on the edge of a nearby chair. "Mrs. Vasa, did you notice anything unusual in your daughter's behavior today? Did she seem anxious or talk about any problems?" "No, quite the opposite, detective. She was radiant with happiness. The whole week had been spent preparing, and today was perfect. The ceremony, the guests, the weather. Kira had said this morning that this was the happiest day of her life." The detective turned to the woman with the camera. "Imani Kanyago, did I get that right?" She nodded, clutching the camera tighter. Her fingers were long and graceful, the hands of someone used to fine work. "Yes, that's me." "You found your friend's body. Tell me how it happened." Imani licked her dry lips and spoke in a low voice. "Kira went upstairs around 7 o'clock. At first, everything was normal. People were dancing, socializing, drinking champagne. But by 9:30, a lot of people started asking where the bride was. Darius said she must have fallen asleep from exhaustion. But I thought that was odd. Kira's not the kind of person who just disappears from her own wedding. So what did you do?" "I decided to go upstairs and see if she was okay. I had a spare room key because I'd helped her get ready in the morning, doing her hair, helping with her makeup." "And what did you see when you entered the room?" Imani closed her eyes for a moment. "The door was ajar, which seemed strange to me. I knocked and called out for Kira, but there was no answer, so I pushed the door open and walked in. At first I thought she had fallen asleep on the bed, but then I realized something was wrong with her. She was lying very still and her face wasn't right." "Did you touch the body?" I moved closer and called out to her. When she didn't respond, I shook her shoulder but realized she was dead. Then I screamed and ran downstairs for help. Moisi scrutinized the faces of his interlocutors. Darius looked confused and devastated, a typical reaction of someone who had lost a loved one. The bride's mother was consumed with grief. Imani, on the other hand, was more composed, though her hands were trembling. "Mrs. Kanyago, how long did you know Kira?" "We've been friends since we were kids. We met in elementary school when I was 8 years old. We studied together, supported each other in every situation. She was like my own sister." "Have you known Mr. Obeng for a long time too?" Imani cast a quick glance at Darius, a glance that lasted only a second, but Moisi noticed it. "I introduced them about a year ago. Darius works as chief accountant at the company where I sometimes do corporate photo shoots." Darius nodded in affirmation. "Imani was doing a photo shoot for our company's annual report. Kira came to pick her up after work, and we met then. That was last October. So, Mr. Obenga, you met Imani first and then met your future wife through her." "Yes, that's right. Imani is a very talented photographer." There was no particular emotion in Darius's voice towards Imani other than professional respect. Moisi noted this detail. Amina Vasa cried again. "Detective, will you find my daughter's killer? She worked as a journalist, writing articles about cultural life, theater productions. She never hurt anyone. Everyone loved her. We'll find who did this, Mrs. Vasa. For now, I need to speak to the hotel staff." Mwesi headed to the front desk where the hotel manager, a nervous man named Robert Chang, who was constantly adjusting his tie, was waiting for him. "Detective, this is a terrible tragedy. In 30 years of working at our hotel, nothing like this has ever happened." "Mr. Chang, which of the staff had access to the 7th floor after 5 o'clock today?" Chang quickly flipped through a file folder. The maid, Maria Gonzalez, finished cleaning at 5 p.m. and went home. After that, only waiter James Patterson worked on the floor. He served the banquet, but would go upstairs with drinks at the guest's request. "I need to talk to this James." The waiter turned out to be a young guy of about 22 who was clearly nervous. "James, tell me about your work tonight, especially what was happening on the 7th floor." "Yes, sir. I worked the banquet downstairs, but went upstairs several times at the request of guests. The last time was around 8, picking up the champagne tray." "Did you see the bride after 7 p.m.? "No, sir, but one of the guests, a friend of the bride, asked for an extra glass of champagne especially for Kira. She said she was going up to her room and wanted to toast her happiness." Mwesi felt something click in his head. This detail didn't fit Imani's story. "Describe this guest." "A tall woman with a large camera, dark hair, lilac dress. Imani, I think her name is." "What time exactly did she ask for this glass?" About 7:45. She said something like, "Can I have another glass? I want to bring it to Kira. She's upstairs changing, and I think she'd enjoy drinking to our happiness in peace." The detective jotted these words down in his notebook. It appeared that Imani had planned to go up to her friend's house much earlier than she had told him. "And then you saw her go up with the glass?" "Yes, sir. About 5 minutes later, I saw her enter the elevator with a glass in her hand." The next morning, Detective Mwesi arrived at the police station early before dawn. It had been a restless night. James's testimony had kept him busy, creating the first major gap in Imani's story. Why had she lied about the time and purpose of her visit to her friend? Mwesi poured himself a strong coffee from the machine and laid out on the table the case files the forensic team had collected overnight. The medical examiner's preliminary report confirmed his suspicions. Kira Niobe had died of poisoning by an unknown substance. No signs of violence were found on the body, which meant that the removal of underwear was a post-mortem action designed to confuse the investigation. The time of death was determined to be between 7:30 and 8 o'clock in the evening. At 9 o'clock in the morning, Darius Obeng was brought to the station for more detailed questioning. The man looked exhausted. He had obviously been up all night too. His black suit was wrinkled, his tie was off, and his eyes were red with tears and fatigue. "Mr. Obenga, I understand how difficult this is for you, but I need more detailed answers to some questions," the detective began, sitting Darius down in the chair across from his desk. "Of course, detective. I'm willing to answer any questions if it will help find Kira's killer. Tell me more about how you met your wife. I want to understand the whole story of your relationship." Darius took a deep breath and leaned back in his chair. "It was last October. Imani was doing a photo shoot for our company's annual report. We were launching a new advertising campaign at the time. She was very professional in her work, shooting not only formal portraits, but also the working atmosphere in the office. After the shoot was over, I offered her a coffee and we got to talking. She told me about her work and I told her about mine. It seemed to me that there was a connection between us. What kind of connection?" "Well, you know." Darius hesitated. "I thought she liked me. She stayed in the office longer than was necessary for work, joking around, laughing at my not-so-funny remarks. I even considered asking her out to dinner. But that didn't happen?" "No. Kira came to pick her up that day. Imani introduced her as her best friend from childhood. And when I saw Kira..." Darius's voice softened. It was like a bolt of lightning. She was so lively, energetic, with that infectious smile. We only talked for a few minutes, but I realized I wanted to see her again. Mwesi carefully recorded every word, noting the emotion in her voice. "And how did Imani react to your interest in her friend?" "Normal at first, it seemed to me. She even gave me Kira's phone number, said that she had recently moved to the city and would be glad to meet her. But now, looking back..." Darius frowned. "Maybe I missed something." "What was that?" "Over the next few weeks, while I was courting Kira, Imani sometimes said strange things. Warned me that Kira was very ambitious, that her career was more important to her than a relationship, or hinted that Kira already had someone in another city. Little things. But in the aggregate, I got the impression that she did not approve of our relationship." "What did Kira herself say about Imani?" "Only good things. She said they'd been friends since childhood, supporting each other in everything. Kira treasured this friendship and often said that Imani was the only person who knew the real her. They had gone through the divorce of Kira's parents, the death of Imani's father, all the important moments of life together." The detective set aside his pen and looked at Darius carefully. "Tell me honestly, have you ever noticed that Imani has romantic feelings for you?" Darius was silent for a long time, pondering his answer. "I'm not sure. Maybe. Sometimes she would look at me in a special way, especially when she thought I couldn't see. And once, about 6 months ago, she tried to talk to me alone at Kira's birthday party. Said she had something important she wanted to discuss. But then Kira came over, and it didn't happen." "You didn't try to find out what she had to say?" "No. To be honest, I preferred not to know. I had a feeling it could cause problems for all three of us." Mwesi nodded and wrote down this information. The picture was beginning to become clearer, a classic love triangle where one party was hiding their true feelings. "Tell me about yesterday in more detail. What happened before and after the ceremony?" "In the morning, I was at home preparing for the wedding. Kira spent the night at her mother's house. It's tradition. We called around noon. She was very excited and happy. Everything went perfectly in the church. After the ceremony, we took pictures. The guests congratulated us. It was very solemn." "And how did Imani behave during and after the ceremony?" Darius wondered. "She took pictures of the whole process. She was very professional. But now that you ask, she seemed tense. She smiled, but it was strained. Kira even asked her during the photo shoot if everything was okay." "And what did Imani say?" "She said she was just worried about her friend and wanted everything to go perfectly." Kira thanked her for her concern. After finishing Darius's interrogation, Mwesi decided to talk to Amina Vasa. Kira's mother was waiting for him in the same hotel lobby where they had met yesterday. She looked even more exhausted. Her eyes were swollen with tears and her hands were shaking as she drank her tea. "Mrs. Vasa, I know how hard this is for you, but I need your help. Tell me about Imani. What was she like? How was her relationship with Kira?" Amina set the cup on the saucer and spoke slowly. "Imani has been part of our family since the girls were 8 years old. My husband died when Kira was 15, and Imani was very supportive during that difficult time. She spent more time with us than at home. Her parents worked a lot and were often away." "But something changed?" "Yes, detective. The changes started about a year ago when Kira met Darius. Imani became, different. More private, sometimes abrasive. She often criticized Darius, saying he was too serious for Kira, that they weren't right for each other." "And yesterday? Did you notice anything different in her behavior?" Amina nodded, and her eyes filled with tears. "Yes, I did. During the preparations for the ceremony in the morning, Imani was very quiet. Usually, she was talking non-stop, making jokes, cheering everyone up. But that day she was silent, doing her work mechanically. Kira asked her several times what was going on with her." "And what did Imani say?" "She said she was tired, that she had a lot of work to do that week. But I've known this girl for 20 years, detective. It wasn't fatigue. It was something else." "What was it?" Amina was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "Sadness. A very deep sadness. And something else. Determination. as if she had made some important decision and was preparing to carry it out. Did she say anything in particular that might be thought-provoking? There was one strange phrase I remembered. When we went to the church, Imani looked at Kira in her wedding dress and said, "I hope you'll be happy, at least for a few hours." Kira laughed, thinking it was a joke about how hard it is to be a married woman. But I thought there was a different meaning in those words. Mwesi felt adrenaline rising through his veins. The phrase sounded almost like a farewell or even a warning. "Mrs. Vasa, have you ever suspected that Imani is in love with Darius?" Amina sighed heavily. I dreaded to think about it. But yes, especially in the last few months. When Kira would talk about her wedding plans, about her honeymoon, about how she and Darius wanted children, Imani would turn very pale. And once, about 3 months ago, I caught her crying after a conversation like that. "You asked her what was wrong." She said she was just worried that after the wedding, their friendship with Kira would change. But the tears weren't about friendship, Detective. They were the tears of a woman losing the man she loves. Why didn't you tell Kira that? What was I supposed to say? That her best friend was in love with her fiancé? It would have ruined everything between them. I was hoping that Imani would get over her feelings, find someone else. Mwesi asked the last question as he prepared to leave. "Yesterday at the hotel after Kira had gone to change, did you see Imani asking for champagne from the waiter?" Amina frowned, trying to remember. "Yes, I think I did." It was about half an hour after Kira had gone up to the room. Imani walked up to the waiter and asked for an extra glass. Said something about bringing it to the bride. "And that seemed natural to you?" Then yes. Imani had always cared for Kira. But now, after everything that's happened, Amina's voice trembled. "Now, I don't think it was a gesture of care." Detective Mwesi returned to the station with the feeling that the puzzle was beginning to come together, but the key pieces were still missing. On his desk was a thick folder with forensic results, medical reports, and crime scene photos. He poured himself another cup of coffee and began to peruse the materials, realizing that this was the moment that would determine the direction of the investigation. Dr. Adams' medical report was detailed and thorough. Kira Niobe had died as a result of potassium cyanide poisoning, a substance that acts quickly and causes death within minutes of ingestion. The concentration of the poison in the blood was high, indicating a significant dose. The medical examiner determined the time of death to be between 7:30 and 8 o'clock in the evening, based on body temperature and other physical indicators. Of particular importance was the record that there were no signs of sexual assault. Moreover, based on the condition of the body, it appeared that the underwear had been removed after death had occurred, as determined by the disposition of the clothing and the absence of signs of struggle. This supported Mwesi's theory that the killer was trying to disguise the true motive of the crime by making it look like a sexual assault. Forensics found traces of potassium cyanide on the champagne glass, as well as the fingerprints of 2 people, Kira herself and another person whose fingerprints matched those found on the room door handle, on the dressing table surface, and on a bottle of perfume. The expert examination showed that the poison had been added to the champagne just before consumption. The drink itself showed no traces of prolonged presence of the poisonous substance. On the bedside table, forensics found a dark, curly hair that did not belong to the victim. Its structure and color indicated that it belonged to a woman of African American descent. They also found a subtle imprint of a woman's high-heeled shoe, the size of a number 37, on the carpet near the bed. Mwesi scrutinized the crime scene photographs taken from different angles. In one of the pictures, he noticed a detail he had missed during the first examination. On the dressing table, next to Kira's cosmetics, there was a small silver earring with a blue stone, which was not part of the bride's jewelry. The earring lay as if it had fallen from someone's ear while bent over the table. The detective picked up his cell phone and dialed the crime lab's number. "Dr. Adams, this is Mwesi." I have a few questions about your report. Go ahead, detective. You mentioned that the potassium cyanide was added to the champagne just before consumption. Can you be more specific? How many minutes before death? Based on the concentration in the stomach and blood, no more than 10 to 15 minutes. Potassium cyanide acts very quickly. In 5 to 7 minutes after entering the body, there is a loss of consciousness, and a few minutes later, death. This substance blocks cellular respiration. Where do you usually get potassium cyanide? It's quite rare and dangerous. It is used in some photographic processes, especially in old methods of tinting black and white pictures, in jewelry for gilding, and sometimes in chemical laboratories. But it is not freely available for sale. Special licenses and permits are required. The connection to photography was all too obvious. Imani, as a professional photographer, might well have access to such chemicals. The next step was to draw up an accurate chronology of events. The detective pulled out a large sheet of paper and began recording the times and actions of each of the participants in the drama, using witness statements and data from the hotel's surveillance cameras. 16:00 is the end of the wedding ceremony. All guests arrive at the Grand Plaza Hotel. 16:30 is the start of the banquet. Kira looks happy, chatting with the guests. Imani is actively taking pictures, but looks tense. 19:00. Kira announces that she is going to her room to change. She goes up to the 7th floor alone. 19:15. Imani asks the waiter for an extra glass of champagne for Kira. 19:20. Imani rides up in the elevator with a glass of champagne. 19:30, 20:000 is the estimated time of Kira's poisoning and death. 19:55. Imani comes downstairs looking pale and agitated. 20:45. Imani announces that she is going to check on her friend. 21:000. Imani discovers the body and raises the alarm. Analyzing the chronology, Mwesi realized that Imani had ample time to commit the crime, almost 40 minutes alone with the victim. Her version that she did not go up to her friend's house until 9:30 was a blatant lie. The detective checked the alibis of the other suspects. Viewing surveillance footage confirmed that Darius had not left the banquet hall even once. He was constantly in sight, socializing with guests, dancing. Amina Vasa was also in full view of all the guests, helping to coordinate service. The only one who had a real opportunity to leave the banquet unnoticed and spend enough time alone with the victim was Imani. Mwesi summoned several wedding guests to the station for more details. Selena Okafor, Kira's college friend, narrated, Imani was absent for quite some time after Kira left to change, about 30 to 40 minutes, and when she returned, she looked strange, pale, agitated. Her hands were shaking as she adjusted the camera. Markel Adebayo, a colleague of Darius, added, after she returned, Imani asked for water, saying she wasn't feeling well, but it seemed to me that it was nervousness rather than physical fatigue. The detective also uncovered important information about Imani's professional activities. A photographic equipment store owner said she regularly ordered rare chemicals including potassium cyanide to tint black and white pictures. The last order was placed 3 months ago. Reconstructing the events of the evening at the hotel, Mwesi realized that Imani's plan was well thought out, but not perfect. She took advantage of the fact that she had a key to her friend's room, prepared the potassium cyanide in advance and waited for the right moment. The request for a glass of champagne, for Kira, was a cover. She actually brought the poison to the room and added it to the drink there. The removal of her underwear from her body was meant to misdirect the investigation and divert attention from the true motive, jealousy and unrequited love. Imani had hoped that the police would look for a maniac rather than focus on the complicated relationship between the girlfriends. However, the detective still needed more convincing evidence. Witness testimony and circumstantial evidence might not have been enough to make serious charges in court. Mwesi decided to arrange a confrontation between Imani and James the waiter to get her to admit to lying in her initial statement. He also wanted to get the results of the forensic examination of the found earring. Having mapped out his next steps, the detective felt confident that the case was nearing a conclusion. All the evidence pointed to Imani Canyago, but he needed either a clear clue or a confession from the suspect herself. Tomorrow, he planned a crucial interrogation that would put an end to this sad case of betrayal, jealousy, and murder on what should have been the happiest day of the young woman's life. Late that evening, Mwesi was still sitting in his office studying the case file. He noticed another detail in one of the photographs. On the dressing table was a small note written in Kira's hand. Remove makeup, change clothes, return to guests, dance with Darius until morning. The list showed that the bride planned to freshen up quickly and wasn't expecting a long visit from her friend with champagne. The following morning, Detective Mwesi carefully prepared himself for the crucial interrogation. He had all the case files in front of him: crime scene photos, forensic results, witness statements, and a chronology of events. He realized that he had enough evidence to press charges, but Imani's confession would strengthen the case and avoid a long and unpredictable trial. At 9 in the morning, Imani Canyago was brought to the station. She looked exhausted. She had obviously been up all night. Her usually neat hair was disheveled, dark circles under her eyes, and her hands were shaking slightly. She still kept her professional camera with her, as if it were the only thing that connected her to normal life. Ms. Canyago, thank you for coming in. I need to clarify some details of your testimony, Mwesi began, seating her in the chair opposite his desk. Of course, Detective. I am willing to help in any way I can to investigate Kira's death, Imani replied, but there was tension in her voice. Tell me again how last night went, starting with when Kira went up to her room. Imani took a deep breath and repeated her version of events. After Kira left to change, I continued taking pictures of the guests, dancing, talking, toasting. By 9:30, people started asking where the bride was, so I decided to go upstairs to see if she was okay. I had a spare key because I'd helped her get ready in the morning. And you never went up to her room again before that time? No, of course not. Why would I go up there? I was working downstairs. Mwesi opened the case file and took out a photograph of a champagne glass. Miss Canyago, do you recognize this glass? Imani looked at the photograph carefully and shook her head. It's just an ordinary champagne glass. There are hundreds of them in the hotel. Your fingerprints were found on this glass, the detective said calmly. How can you explain that? Imani's face paled slightly, but she quickly found an answer. I may have accidentally touched it when I found Kira's body. I was in shock. I might not have been able to control my movements. Interesting. Now listen to the testimony of James Patterson, the waiter. Mwesi switched on a tape recorder with a recording of last night's conversation with the waiter. The young man's voice filled the office. One of the guests, a friend of the bride, asked for an extra glass of champagne, especially for Kira Saeed. She was going up to her room and wanted to toast her happiness. It was about 7:45. About 5 minutes later, I saw her enter the elevator with a glass in her hand. A tall, slender woman with a big camera, Imani, I think her name is. Imani sat motionless, but Mwesi noticed the muscles in her jaw tense. Ms. Canyago, do you have an explanation for this contradiction? She was silent for a few seconds, clearly trying to come up with a plausible version. Yes, I did go up to Kira's earlier. I just forgot about it. Too much emotion, stress. Brought her some champagne. We talked for a while, and I went back downstairs. Kira was alive and well when I left. What did you talk about? The wedding, how happy she was. Just the usual friend-to-friend chatter. How long were you in the room? About 15 minutes, tops. Kira was taking off her makeup. I was just keeping her company. Mwesi got up from the table and walked to the window, then turned sharply to Imani. That's a lie, Ms. Canyago. The security cameras show that you were on the 7th floor for 35 minutes. That's too long for a friendly conversation with a woman who was in a hurry to change clothes and get back to her guests. Imani clenched her hands into fists, but continued to deny it. Perhaps the cameras are wrong. Or I lingered in the restroom on the same floor. I don't remember exactly. What do you have to say about this? The detective pulled out a small, clear bag containing a silver earring. This earring was found in Kira's room, on the dressing table. It didn't belong to the bride. You don't recognize it? Imani touched her ears and turned even paler. She had the exact same earring with a blue stone on her left ear, and her right ear was empty. Yeah, may have lost it when I was bending over Kira to check her pulse. Ms. Canyago, do you realize you're lying to the police? This is a serious crime in itself. Mwesi returned to his desk and opened another folder. We have the forensic results of the contents of the glass. Potassium cyanide, a deadly poison used in photographic processes, was found in the champagne. 3 months ago, you ordered this substance from a chemical supplier. Imani remained silent, staring at the floor. Her breathing became rapid and shallow. We also talked to the wedding guests. Many remarked on your strange behavior during the day. You were tense, silent. After returning from the room, Kira looked shaken. Her hands were shaking. Her face was pale. The detective paused, giving Imani time to realize the hopelessness of her situation. Do you want to tell me the truth about what happened in the room? Or will you continue to lie? Imani slowly raised her head. Tears were in her eyes, and her face was a mixture of despair and relief. I didn't mean to kill her, she said quietly. I didn't plan it. What did you plan? I just wanted to talk to her, to tell her the truth about how I felt about Darius, to admit that I was in love with her husband. Mwesi sat back down at his desk and took out his tape recorder. Miss Canyago, I must warn you that everything you say is being recorded and can be used against you in court. Do you want a lawyer? No. I want to tell the story myself. I'm tired of lying. Then start from the beginning. When did you realize you were in love with Darius? Imani wiped away her tears and spoke in a shaky voice. From the very first day we met. He was doing a photo shoot for his company, and there was an instant connection between us. We talked, we laughed, we shared common interests. I thought he had a crush on me too. I even planned to invite him to dinner after the shoot was over. But then Kira showed up. Yes, she came to pick me up as usual. We often drove home together after my work. I introduced her to Darius as my best friend, and I saw the way he looked at her. Imani's voice became bitter and full of pain. He looked at her in a way he had never looked at me before, like he saw something incredibly beautiful. And Kira. She immediately started flirting with him, smiling, making eyes at him. Completely forgot about me. Why did you give him her phone number? What could I do? Kira's been my best friend since I was a kid. I couldn't say no to her or tell her how I felt. I hoped it wouldn't get serious, that it was just a fling. But they got married. Yes, and all this time I was tormented, seeing how happy they were together, how much Darius loved her. Kira was always telling me about their relationship, sharing her plans for the future, asking for advice. I smiled and supported her, though I was dying of jealousy inside. Mwesi listened attentively, realizing that Imani was finally telling the truth. Tell me about yesterday. How did you feel? It was a nightmare, detective. Seeing the man you love marry your best friend. I cried during the ceremony, and everyone thought it was for Kira, but I was actually crying in pain. And that's when you decided to kill her? Imani shook her head. No, not then. The decision came later, during the banquet. I looked at them, so happy, in love. Kira was talking about their honeymoon, about the children they wanted, and Darius was kissing her, oblivious to everyone around him. What exactly made you take the poison? One moment. Kira came up to me and said, Imani, thank you for introducing us. If it wasn't for you, we never would have met. You gave me the best man in the world. And she hugged me, genuinely grateful. Imani's voice trailed off. In that moment, I realized that I couldn't take it anymore. That I would spend the rest of my life seeing their happiness and remembering that I had led them to each other. That Kira had everything: love, family, a future. And I was left with nothing. So you went for the poison? I always had a little jar of potassium cyanide in my car for work. I went out to the parking lot, got it, and went back to the hotel. I asked the waiter for a glass of champagne and went up to Kira's room. What was going on in the room? Imani closed her eyes, remembering those terrible minutes. Kira was happy to see me, sitting at the dressing table, taking off her makeup. She said she was tired from the heavy dress and wanted to change quickly so she could get back to Darius. I handed her a glass and told her I wanted to drink with her to her happiness. She didn't suspect anything strange. No, she was happy and relaxed. She took the glass, clinked it with me, and drank it. I added the poison while she turned her back to the mirror. And what happened next? She started feeling ill almost immediately. She complained of dizziness, nausea, asked if the champagne was poisoned, and then she collapsed. Imani sobbed. It was horrible, detective. She was dying in front of me and there was nothing I could do. Even if I wanted to call a doctor, it was too late. Why did you take her underwear off? I was panicking. I knew I'd be the first to be suspected because I'd found the body. I decided to stage a sex crime to deflect suspicion. I thought the police would be looking for the maniac, not me. And then you went downstairs and pretended like nothing happened for an hour? I tried to pull myself together, to work as usual, but my hands were shaking. I felt awful. I wanted to confess several times, but I didn't dare. Mwesi put aside his pen and looked at Imani carefully. Miss Kanyago, do you realize the seriousness of your confession? You killed a man out of jealousy. I know, she replied quietly. And I don't apologize. Kira was a good person, she didn't deserve to die. But I just couldn't live with the pain anymore. What about Darius? Did you think about causing him suffering? Imani laughed bitterly. Of course I did. But I also hoped that in time I could comfort him, that we would find each other in grief. Foolish, isn't it? Extremely foolish. Now you'll spend the rest of your lives in prison, and Darius will remember Kira as the beloved wife who was taken from him. The detective stood up and walked to the door. Ms. Kanyago, you're under arrest for first-degree murder. You will now be taken to the jail where you will await trial. As Imani was led out of the office in handcuffs, Mwesi was left alone with his thoughts. Another case was closed, but he felt no satisfaction. Too many lives had been ruined because of unrequited love and jealousy. 2 young women, one dead, one going to prison for life, and a man losing his wife on the happiest day of his life. The detective wrote the final report on the case, noting all the key evidence and the suspect's confession. The Kira Niobe murder case was officially closed, but the bitterness of this tragedy will long remain with all those who witnessed the destruction of friendship, love, and human lives with one fateful decision.